cold December wind whistled through the slightly ajar window, bringing with it the bone-chilling cold characteristic of suburban California late at night. I shivered, pulling my sweater collar higher, leaning my back against the window frame and looking into the living room. Inside, the air was thick with the warm scent of pine from the floor-to-ceiling Christmas tree, mingling with the smell of grilled meat and hot corned bread. The buzz of laughter and conversation, the clinking of glasses created a symphony of reunion. The Ortega family always knew how to throw the biggest Christmas parties in this Covina neighborhood. I held the glass of red wine in my hand, gently swirling the deep red liquid, gazing at the familiar faces. There were about 25 people here. Joseph was sitting at the poker table, his hearty laughter ringing out every time he won a hand. Alice was busy in the kitchen, but still didn't forget to look out and joke with her nephews and nieces. The children were running all over the place, their eyes shining brightly at the huge gift boxes piled up under the tree. Everything was so peaceful, a perfect picture of American family happiness. Outside, the sky was pitch black. The faint yellow streetlights cast the shadows of bare tree branches onto the cold asphalt. I looked at the wall clock. It was quite late. The party was winding down. Some people were starting to get ready to leave, but most still lingered to enjoy the last bit of the festive atmosphere. I planned to finish this glass and then excuse myself to leave early as I had the morning shift tomorrow. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. The sharp, crisp sound cut through the mellow Christmas music. Everyone paused for a moment. Who would come at this hour? Perhaps a late guest or a neighbor bringing over a pie. An 8-year-old girl, the host's daughter, cheered excitedly when someone joked that Santa Claus had arrived. She dashed to the main door. I was standing in the corner of the room, with a direct view of the hallway, so I could clearly observe everything. The heavy oak door was opened. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure, completely filling the frame. A bright red suit, a fake white beard, and the familiar red conical hat. In his hand he held a large gift package. It was indeed Santa Claus. The children gasped with delight, but something was wrong. His posture was stiff, and the eyes hidden behind the gold-rimmed glasses held no trace of a smile. They were cold and soulless. I saw his hand move. It was not the motion of handing over a gift. He pulled a black object from the large gift package. A flash of light. There was no loud sound like in the movies, just a sharp, dry crack. The little girl collapsed right on the doorstep. Blood began to spread on the reindeer-patterned doormat. The space seemed to freeze for a second. My brain refused to process what I had just witnessed. This was a joke. It must be a fake gun. It must be ketchup. But then the acrid smell of gunpowder assaulted my nostrils, sweeping away every weak denial. He stepped into the house, his strides long and decisive. In his 2 hands, he held 2 semi-automatic pistols. He began to fire. A continuous volley of explosions rang out, tearing apart the cozy space. Glass cups on the table shattered. Fragments of food flew everywhere. Screams began to erupt, throat-tripping and full of horror. Everyone frantically scrambled for cover. Joseph flipped the poker table over to use as a shield, but the bullets penetrated the flimsy wood-like paper. I saw him walk calmly through the living room, the muzzles of the guns moving mechanically, sweeping away lives like a grim reaper working in a field. Not a word, not a growl of anger, only a deadly silence emanating from him, in stark contrast to the chaos around him. I recognized him. Even though the fake beard obscured half his face, those eyes and that physique were unmistakable. Bruce, Sylvia's ex-husband. He had divorced her and left behind so many legal troubles, but no one thought he would dare to do this. He had come here for revenge. My survival instinct surged. I couldn't stand rooted here to be a target. I threw my wine glass to the floor, crouched low, and crawled behind the long sofa. Bullets whizzed over my head, slamming into the drywall, kicking up dust. I saw Sylvia. She was trying to run towards the stairs but stumbled. Bruce stepped closer to her. I wanted to rush out, wanted to do something, but fear paralyzed my limbs. If I revealed myself now, I would die. I bit my lip until it bled to stifle a sob. I had to live. I had to get out of here to call the police. He didn't just use guns. After the magazines emptied, he threw the empty guns to the floor and pulled a strange device from the large sack on his back. It looked like a garden sprayer, but bigger and heavier. He operated it very quickly. A torrent of liquid sprayed violently into every corner of the room. The pungent smell of gasoline rose immediately, acrid and nauseating. It was racing fuel. He was going to burn us all alive. I knew I didn't have much time left. I quickly crawled toward the large glass window overlooking the backyard. The door was locked tight. I grabbed a nearby stool, mustered all my strength, and smashed it against the glass pane. The glass shattered with a loud clang. The noise drew his attention. Bruce turned his head. through the flickering lights of the Christmas tree, I saw him raise the nozzle, aiming it at me. Without hesitation, I lunged through the broken window frame, full of sharp glass shards. The glass cut into my flesh painfully, my clothes were ripped, but I didn't care. I tumbled onto the dew-soaked grass in the backyard. My ankle shot with a sharp, agonizing pain. It was probably sprained when I landed. Immediately behind me, a horrifying wave of heat erupted. A deep boom echoed, as if a fire monster had just awakened. I turned back. Flames burst fiercely from inside the living room, engulfing the curtains, the Christmas tree, and the people trapped inside. I tried to suppress the pain, dragging myself toward the wooden fence separating the property from the neighbors. I heard the glass exploding because the temperature was rising too fast. The fire licked through the window frame I had just jumped out of, red and ferocious. I climbed over the fence, falling onto the neighbor's yard. A neighbor had just opened their back door, their face aghast looking at the towering flames. "Call 911. I screamed at him, my voice hoarse. "Call the police, he's inside. He has a gun and fire." The neighbor hurriedly ran back inside his house. I sat down on the grass, leaning against the old oak tree, gasping for breath. Blood from the cuts on my hands and legs soaked my jeans, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the cold in my heart right now. I looked at the Ortega family's house. The fire had spread to the second floor. Thick columns of black smoke coiled up into the night sky, obscuring the moonlight. The sirens of police cars and fire trucks began to wail in the distance, getting closer and closer, echoing in the stillness of Christmas night. From my position, I saw a figure leap out from the second floor. Someone had jumped to escape. I hoped it was one of the children. I prayed for them. Then I saw him, Bruce. He walked out from the front door, his Santa Claus suit now charred and patchy. He was limping. It seemed the flames had licked at him too. He wasn't running away in a panic. He walked heavily toward the car parked by the street. I wanted to scream and point him out to the police, but my throat was choked with anguish. I could only sit there, helplessly watching him climb into the car and speed away, leaving behind a living hell that he had just created. The house was gradually collapsing in a sea of fire. The memories, the laughter, the unopened gifts, all were turning to ashes. The smell of burning flesh, burning wood, burning plastic intertwined to create a haunting stench that I knew would follow me for the rest of my life. The police swarmed the scene, cordoning off the area. Firefighters began spraying water onto the raging inferno, but it seemed all efforts were too late for those still trapped inside. I was helped into an ambulance. A paramedic wrapped a thermal blanket around me, wiping the blood from my face. He asked if I was in pain anywhere. I shook my head. The physical pain was nothing right now. I stared at the dying fire, which revealed the charred skeleton of the house. That Christmas night, Bruce Pardo didn't just kill the Ortega family. He killed faith, he killed peace, and he killed the meaning of this holiday in all our hearts. He had turned a silent, holy night into a night of blood and fire. Later, I heard the police found his body at his brother's house, about 40 miles away. He had taken his own life. Perhaps the burns from the melted Santa suit sticking to his skin had caused him extreme pain, or perhaps he had completed his wicked mission and had no further attachment to this world. I survived, but a part of my soul died in the flames that night. Every time I see the color red of a Christmas outfit, every time I smell smoke, or hear the doorbell ring at night, my heart tightens. The image of the man in the red suit, gun and flamethrower in hand, standing tall in the main doorway, still appears in my nightmares every night. That is the eternal Christmas gift Bruce left me, a gift of haunting that will never fade. The incessant, characteristic downpour of the Pacific Northwest was relentlessly drenching the Carnation Valley. The frigid raindrops lashed against the windshield of my old pickup truck, creating messy, blurry streaks. I turned off the engine, leaving the faint yellow headlights shining onto the gravel road that led up to the Anderson grandparents' house. Wayne and Judy's house was tucked deep inside, far from the main road, nestled among tall, dense fir trees. Christmas night should have been filled with colored lights and music, but this area was plunged into deep darkness and an eerie silence. I was carrying a box of apple crumb cake, a Christmas gift I had promised to bring Judy that afternoon, but was only able to deliver now due to work at the lumber mill. I decided to walk instead of driving, partly to enjoy the cool air, and partly because I didn't want to disturb them if they were gathered for a party. The dirt road was muddy under my boots. My squishing footsteps were swallowed by the sound of the rain and the wind whistling through the treetops. When the house came into view, I felt that something was wrong. The large wooden house was pitch black, with only a faint yellow light emanating from the living room. There were no twinkling decorative lights on the porch as Wayne usually put up every year. The gate was wide open. The silence was so profound that I could hear my own heart pounding in my chest. I moved closer, hugging the shadows of the woodshed located to the left of the main house. I saw Wayne's pickup truck parked there, and another unfamiliar car blocking the driveway. Maybe they had guests. Suddenly, a sweep of headlights made me duck down. Another car was pulling into the driveway. It was Scott, the Andersons' son. I recognized the car because Scott often stopped by my lumber mill for materials. He was with his wife, Erica, and their 2 children, Nathan and Olivia. The car stopped, the doors opened. Scott got out, carrying large gift bags. Erica was holding little Olivia, and Nathan trotted after his father. The image of the happy family appeared vividly under the porch light that had just been switched on. I was about to step out to greet them, thinking I had been overly worried, but my feet froze. The front door of the house opened, but it wasn't Wayne or Judy who came out to welcome their children and grandchildren. It was Michelle, the Andersons' youngest daughter, and her surly boyfriend, Joseph. I stood rooted in the darkness, about 30 meters away from them. Michelle was wearing dark clothes. Her face looked pale and emotionless under the porch light. She wasn't smiling. Joseph stood right behind her, large and looming like a rock, his hands hidden behind his back. There was a heated argument, partially drowned out by the rain. I saw Scott stop, his expression confused. He asked something about his parents. Michelle answered curtly. I noticed the muscles on Joseph's body tense up. Then Joseph pulled his hand out from behind his back, a large, black handgun. I held my breath, clamping my hands over my mouth to stifle the scream that was about to escape. Scott backed away, holding up his hands as if to calm the man, but Joseph didn't hesitate. He raised the gun. A sharp, loud bang rang out, tearing the silent night, louder than the distant rumble of thunder. Scott collapsed right on the doorstep, blood splashing onto the brightly colored Christmas gift bags. Erica screamed, a heart-wrenching, desperate, and horrified mother's scream. She hugged her child tightly, trying to turn and run back toward the car, but Michelle blocked her way. She was holding another gun. Gunshots rang out repeatedly. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots. Erica fell down next to her husband. The baby in her arms dropped onto the cold ground. I trembled violently, tears mixing with rainwater streaming down my face. I wanted to rush out, wanted to do something, but a primal fear had frozen all my muscles. I knew if I moved, I would be the next one lying on that cold ground. I was just a carpenter with a box of apple cake in my hand. I was no hero. The next scene turned my stomach. Joseph walked over to the 2 children who were screaming beside their parents' bodies. He knelt down. His coldness was even scarier than death itself. He didn't hesitate. He raised the gun. I squeezed my eyes shut, turning my face away. 2 more dry, cruel shots rang out. The crying stopped. Silence returned, heavy and infinitely more grim. There was only the sound of rain pattering on the shed's tin roof and the wind whistling through the cracks. I peered through a gap in the firewood pile. Michelle and Joseph were standing there, looking down at the scattered bodies. They showed no sign of panic or remorse. They exchanged a few words, then began to drag the bodies inside the house. I realized a horrifying truth. Wayne and Judy must have been killed earlier. That was why the house was dark and silent when I arrived. The 2 of them had been lying in wait, anticipating Scott and his family's arrival to wipe out the entire family. A meticulously planned, wicked scheme carried out on Christmas night. The house door closed. Darkness swallowed the front yard. I knew I couldn't stay here for another second. They would come back out to clean up the scene or check the surroundings. I gently placed the box of cake onto the muddy ground, not daring to make any noise. I lay flat on the ground, crawling toward the dense woods behind the shed. The cold mud seeped through my jacket, sticky against my skin. Thorns and dead branches scratched my arms, but I felt no pain. In my head, there was only one thought: I must live. I must escape this hell. Once deep in the woods, I dared to stand up and run. I ran for my life, constantly stumbling, hitting trees, but struggling to get back up and keep going. I didn't dare look back, afraid that a flashlight beam or that black gun muzzle would appear behind me. I ran through the forest to reach the main road, far from the driveway where my truck was parked. I didn't dare take the truck now. The engine noise would alert them. I ran for over 3 miles in the pouring rain to the nearest gas station. When I saw the red and blue neon lights of the gas station, I collapsed by the roadside, breathless. The night shift attendant looked at me with horror. My entire body was covered in mud and blood from the scratches, my face deathly pale. I borrowed the landline phone, my hand trembling as I dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional. I struggled to stammer out the words, reporting the shooting, the bodies, Michelle and Joseph. Police arrived at the scene not long after. They found 6 bodies in the house. Wayne and Judy were shot dead in the living room. Scott, Erica, Nathan, and Olivia were shot on the porch and dragged inside. Michelle and Joseph were still there when the police arrived. They didn't flee. They calmly denied the crime, fabricating absurd stories. But my testimony, along with the irrefutable evidence at the scene, exposed their wicked crime. Later, when the case went to trial, I learned of their despicable motive. All because of money, petty accumulated conflicts, and a furious selfishness that led Michelle to ruthlessly murder her own parents and brother. Many years have passed, but every time Christmas comes, when I see the twinkling lights and hear the cheerful music, I still shiver with a cold dread. The image of the wooden house engulfed in darkness, the cold sound of the rain, and the gunshots tearing through the night air still haunt my every sleep. I remember the lifeless eyes of Michelle and the cold brutality of Joseph as clearly as if it were yesterday. That Christmas night incarnation had no Santa Claus, no miracles, only blood, tears, and human depravity. And I, an unwilling witness, carry that horrifying memory for the rest of my life, like a scar that will never heal. I survived, but the joy of Christmas in me died with the Anderson family on that fateful night. The wind howled in gusts through the cracks of the ancient oak window frames, carrying the biting cold of the West Virginia mountains on Christmas Eve, 1945. Thick snow fell outside, blanketing the town of Fayetteville in a uniform white, quiet, and desolate. I lay on the old spring bed on the first floor, listening to the dwindling crackle of coal in the fireplace. The entire 2-story wooden house was asleep, with only the steady snoring of my father from the next room and the wind's moan outdoors. Tonight was supposed to be the most peaceful night of the year. My mother had let the children stay up later than usual because it was a holiday. Morris, Martha, Louie, Jenny, and Betty, my 5 younger siblings, were still awake in the attic when I wished them good night. They were excited about the new toys and the chocolate bars hidden under their pillows. I remembered the smile of Betty, the youngest, when she promised to wake up the earliest to see if Santa Claus had left anything in the stocking hung by the fireplace. A phone ring suddenly tore through the dead silence. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. Who would call at this hour? I heard my mother rushing out into the hallway, picking up the receiver. Her voice was sleepy, mixed with a hint of annoyance. I held my breath, listening. A long silence followed. Then, the sound of my mother slamming the receiver down onto the cradle. She muttered something about a wrong number and a strange, cackling laugh on the other end. That small incident sowed a vague sense of unease in my heart, as if an invisible pair of eyes were watching the house from the darkness outside. I tried to drift back to sleep but couldn't. A strange smell began to creep into my nostrils. It wasn't the fragrant pine, nor the lingering smell of baked goods from dinner. It was the smell of something burning, the smell of burning rubber and scorched wood. I sprang up, rushing out of my room. The hallway was filled with gray smoke. The smoke wasn't rising from the stove, but rolling down from the ceiling, from the electrical wiring that ran along the wooden partitions. Fire! I screamed for my parents. My cry woke up the entire first floor. My father, George, rushed out with a frantic look on his face. He didn't need to ask what was happening. The fire had already started licking at the wooden staircase, the only path to the attic where my 5 siblings were sleeping. We ran out the front door. The cold wind rushed in, fanning the flames and making them flare up more violently. My mother carried baby Sylvia out into the yard. I pulled John and George Jr. with me. We stood on the freezing snow, barefoot, trembling as we looked up at the second floor. The attic window was still dark. The children weren't awake yet, or the smoke had suffocated them. My father let out a cry of agony and rushed back inside, but the staircase had become a colossal column of fire. He couldn't get up. He came back out, his eyes bloodshot from smoke and despair. A patch of his hair was singed. "We need the ladder," my father yelled at me. I understood immediately. There was a long wooden ladder that was always leaning against the side of the house. It was long enough to reach my siblings' window. My father and I ran around to the side of the house, disregarding the pieces of burning coal falling down on our heads. But the ladder wasn't there. I was stunned. The ladder was always there. It hadn't been moved for years. We searched frantically in the dark, digging through the piles of snow around the area. It was nowhere to be found. Someone had taken it, or someone had hidden it. A terrifying coincidence. My father didn't give up. He remembered the 2 coal trucks parked on the side of the house. He could drive a truck right up to the wall, climb onto the truck bed, and reach the second-floor window. The plan was feasible. I ran after my father to the truck. He jumped into the cabin, his hands shaking as he inserted the key into the ignition. The engine tried to start. KH letter 1E5C, KH letter 1E5C, then silence. He tried again, still just a weak groan from the engine. My father slammed his hand on the steering wheel, sweating profusely despite the sub-zero temperature. This truck had been working fine just yesterday. He jumped out, rushing to the second truck. I stood below, looking up at the attic window. Black smoke had begun to seep through the cracks of the closed window. I saw the flickering shadow of fire behind the glass pane. My siblings were in there. Morris, wake up. Martha, please wake up. I screamed in my mind, my throat tight, unable to utter a sound. The second truck also failed to start. Both trucks stalled at the same time, at this precise moment of life and death. It was impossible. My father was a mechanic. He took better care of his vehicles than himself. Someone had interfered. Someone had cut the wires or done something to immobilize us. Despair began to consume my mind. The wooden house caught fire too quickly, as if it had been soaked in gasoline. The roof began to sag. Loud explosions rang out as the wooden beams collapsed. My mother collapsed onto the snow, covering her face, her cries swallowed by the wind and the fire's roar. She looked up at the window where her children were trapped. She wanted to rush in, but I managed to hold her back. The intense heat emanating from the flames made my face burn. My father still wouldn't surrender. He ran to the reserved rainwater cistern, but the water in the barrel was frozen solid. He used a bucket to scoop chunks of ice and throw them at the massive fire, a futile and utterly painful act. I saw the silhouette of a neighbor running towards us from afar, but it was too late. The roof collapsed with a terrifying crash. The entire second floor fell into the heart of the blazing house. Millions of embers flew up into the night sky like ghostly fireflies, merging with the white snowflakes. There were no more cries for help, no more knocking on the window, only the cruel, triumphant roar of the fire. We stood there helpless, watching the house turn to ashes. In less than an hour, the Sauter family's home was obliterated. My 5 siblings, Morris, Martha, Louie, Jenny, Betty, they were still in there, or at least I thought they were in there. The next morning, when the weak sun emerged from behind the gray clouds, the fire scene appeared stark and heartbreaking. The entire house was reduced to a smoldering pile of black ashes and a solitary brick chimney standing against the sky. The police and fire department arrived too late. They could only stand and take notes. My parents and the 4 of us surviving siblings huddled in the woodshed, our eyes vacant as we looked out at the wreckage. The strange thing began when they searched for the bodies. I followed my father, using a shovel and bare hands to sift through the hot ashes. We searched for bones. We searched for anything left of the 5 children. A tooth, a fragment of a skull, a piece of unburnt clothing. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a single bone fragment, not a trace of charred flesh. In a normal house fire, no matter how intense, human bones cannot completely disappear. Experts said the temperature would have to be extremely high and the fire would have to burn for many hours to completely incinerate bones. But our house burned for less than 45 minutes, and the metal kitchen appliances were still intact, not even completely melted. So why did my siblings' bones vanish? A crazy thought popped into my head, and I saw that spark of hope flicker in my parents' eyes too. What if they weren't dead? What if they were kidnapped before the fire started? The scattered pieces began to connect. The mysterious phone call with the cackling laugh. The missing ladder was later found dumped near an embankment far from the house. Both trucks failed to start because the ignition wires were cut. Our telephone line was also cut, but someone had mistakenly cut the power line instead, proving he intended to completely isolate us. And a few days earlier, a strange man had come to sell insurance and threatened my father that the house would burn down and the children would be burned alive because of my father's political views on Mussolini. At the time, we thought he was just a lunatic, but now that curse had come true. The days that followed were a tormented and fruitless search. My father fenced off the land, turning it into a memorial. He posted pictures of the 5 children on a large billboard by the road, offering a reward for any information. I often stood in front of that sign for hours, looking at my siblings' innocent faces. I recalled that fateful night. I remembered the strange silence from the attic. Why didn't they call for help? Why didn't they smash the window? Were they drugged and taken away before the fire? Someone claimed to have seen children resembling my siblings in a taxi driving through town that night. Someone claimed to have seen them at a hotel in Charleston. My parents traveled everywhere, pursuing every clue, no matter how small. They met with the FBI, wrote to the president, but every door was closed in their faces. The case was closed with a conclusion of an accident due to faulty wiring, despite the fact that the electrical system had just been inspected and the telephone line was deliberately cut. Many years passed and the pain didn't subside but transformed into another form. The suspicion gnawed at our souls. Every Christmas Eve, instead of the joy of reunion, we were immersed in the ghost of the past. I often dreamed of Morris standing by the window, waving to me, but when I ran to him, the boy dissolved into white smoke. I lived on, married, and had children, but a part of me died on Christmas Eve, 1945. I never found out the truth. Did my siblings die in agony in the flames, or are they living somewhere in the world, stripped of their memories and identity? Once my father received an unstamped letter containing a photo of a young man about Louis's age. On the back, it read, "Louis Sauter, I love brother Frankie, A90132 children." My father hired a detective to find the person in the photo, but the detective also vanished without a trace. The mystery of the Sauter children remains forever under the ashes of that Christmas night. I grew old, my parents passed away with their unanswered longing, but the question remains, suspended in the gray sky of Fayetteville. Where did they go? Every time the cold December wind returns, I hear Betty's laughter, Morris's running. I smell the acrid smoke and feel the helplessness of standing by and watching the fire swallow my loved ones. That is the life sentence I must carry, the sentence of a survivor who could save nothing but eternal torment. Christmas for others is a miracle. For me, it is the day when demons stepped out of the darkness, stole the angels, and left behind an unsolvable question. A question that burns faintly like the coal fire in the furnace, never going out. Biting wind from the great Miami River swept into the city of Dayton, bringing the characteristic numbing cold of Ohio in late December. Snow had been falling all afternoon, covering everything in a thick, heavy white blanket. I stood on the porch, my breath puffing out in white clouds, holding a snow shovel to clear a path for the car parked in the driveway. Christmas Eve was approaching, and the air in the neighborhood was so quiet that I could hear the crunch of tires on the road from a few blocks away. I didn't like being out at this hour. There was an uneasy feeling lurking in the darkness of the alleys, in the flickering yellow light of the street lamps swaying in the wind. Dayton was not peaceful this year. News of robberies and senseless shootings buzzed on the radio every morning. But my wife needed to buy a few more things for tomorrow's party, and I was always the one tasked with clearing the vehicle paths. I struck the shovel hard against the concrete to shake off the clinging snow. The sharp sound of metal echoed in the silent space. I paused for a moment to adjust my scarf, my eyes wandering toward the end of the street. A dark-colored car was slowly approaching. It did not have its headlights on. I should have been immediately alerted from that moment. No one drives in heavy snow at night with their lights off, unless they don't want to be seen. But the fatigue of a long day and the cold that numbed my senses made me complacent. I thought it was just some early drunk drivers or some rowdy teenagers looking for a parking spot to hang out. The car silently drifted on the slippery road and stopped right in front of my driveway, blocking the exit of the car I had just finished shoveling snow for. The driver's side window slowly lowered. I squinted to look inside. The darkness in the car was too dense. I could vaguely make out about 3 or 4 people huddled together. Young faces, probably only 18 or 20. They stared at me. There was no loud music, none of the mocking laughter typical of young troublemakers, only a deathly silence and cold, reptilian eyes. The young man in the driver's seat spoke. He asked for directions. His voice was deep, monotone, with no emotion. He asked for an address I had never heard of in this neighborhood. I took a step closer, still maintaining a safe distance, my hand instinctively gripping the shovel handle for self-defense. I shook my head, telling him he was going the wrong way, that the address wasn't in this area. The young man nodded slightly, as if he already knew the answer. He turned to say something to the person next to him. The back door opened. 2 other young men stepped out of the car. They wore baggy jackets and their hoods were pulled up over their heads. Their demeanor exuded arrogance and danger. I took a step back. The chill running down my spine was not from the snow. I realized I was standing alone in the yard, completely exposed, while my wife and daughter were inside the house, completely unaware of the danger lurking right outside the door. The leader, the one in the driver's seat, now stepped out too. He looked at me, a faint smirk playing on his lips. In his hand, a black metal object glinted. It was a semi-automatic handgun. Time seemed to stand still. All sounds around me disappeared, leaving only the frantic pounding of my heart in my chest, threatening to burst out. I looked at the gun, then into his eyes. Those eyes were empty. No anger, no hatred, no fear. They were like the eyes of a dead fish, soulless and cruel. He looked at me as if I were a sandbag, an inanimate object, not a human being. He gestured with his chin toward my car. He wanted the keys. I didn't hesitate. No car was worth more than a life. I slowly lowered the shovel, raising both hands to show I was unarmed. I said in a trembling voice that the keys were still in the ignition, they could take the car and go, and I wouldn't do anything. I saw disappointment flash in the eyes of one of the guys standing behind the leader. It seemed they were hoping for resistance, a reason to erupt in violence. My easy surrender spoiled their game. The leader stepped toward me, the muzzle of the gun still pointed directly at my chest. He approached my car, glancing inside. Then he turned back to look at me. He didn't get into the car. He also didn't signal his accomplices to take the car. He simply raised the gun a little higher, aiming it at me. Why, the question echoed in my head but couldn't escape my choked throat. I had given them the car. I had followed every request. Why did he still want to shoot? A sharp bang rang out, tearing the silent night. I felt a tremendous impact on my left shoulder, as if someone had hit me with a sledgehammer. My body was thrown backward, falling face down onto the cold snow. The pain hadn't hit yet, only a rapid spreading numbness. I tried to lift my head. He was still standing there, gun smoke mingling with his breath from the black muzzle. He stepped closer. 2 more shots rang out. The second bullet lodged in my thigh. The third grazed my ribcage. This time it hurt. A sharp, searing pain tearing through my flesh, burning my nerves. I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming. I knew if I screamed, they would shoot me in the head. The instinct for survival surged stronger than ever. I had to play dead. I lay motionless on the snow, my face pressed against the cold ice. Warm blood poured from my wounds, soaking my thick jacket, seeping through my skin and staining the white snow around me red. The cold from the ground seeped into me, battling the fever from blood loss. I heard the crunch of footsteps on the snow approaching, the sound of shoes grinding on the ice right next to my ear. My breathing had to be very light, very quiet now. I held my breath, my chest aching from the strain. One of the guys poked my side with the tip of his shoe. The kick wasn't hard, just exploratory. I relaxed my body, letting him prod, trying to mimic the state of a lifeless corpse. "He's dead," a voice said, a young voice but utterly vicious. The leader sneered. His laughter was dry, devoid of any human warmth. He said something about the car being too old, not worth taking. He scoffed at the car I had saved up for years to buy. They shot me, nearly killed me, only to insult the car and drive away. My life was cheaper than an old toy in their eyes. The sound of car doors slamming shut. The engine roared. Their car backed up, turned around, and sped off, leaving me alone in the pool of blood and cold snow. I waited until the sound of the engine completely disappeared beyond the houses before I dared to move. The pain now hit me like a tidal wave. Every muscle in my body screamed. The blood still flowed ceaselessly. I knew I couldn't stay here. The cold would kill me before I died from blood loss. I tried to crawl toward the house door. Both my legs were numb. One thigh was shattered by the bullet, making it impossible to stand. I had to use my elbows to inch forward on the slippery snow. Every movement was sheer agony. My blood painted a long, dark red streak on the white ground, marking the path of survival I was struggling to cross. The front door was only about 10 meters away, but it felt 1,000 miles distant now. I saw the warm light streaming from the living room window. My wife was probably sitting there watching TV or wrapping gifts. Didn't she hear the gunshots? Or did she think it was just early firecrackers from the neighbor's kids? I wanted to call her name, but my throat was dry and tasted of blood. I could only manage faint groans. My strength waned, my vision began to blur. The image of the house was smeared by tears and falling snow. I felt sleepy, a gentle and dangerous drowsiness. I knew if I closed my eyes now, I would never wake up again. "Don't sleep," I slapped myself in the face, but my hand was numb. I bit hard into my lower lip until it bled, letting the pain keep me awake. I thought of my daughter. She was only 5 years old. Tomorrow was Christmas. I had promised to open presents with her. I couldn't die like this. I couldn't let her find her father frozen to death on the doorstep on Christmas morning. That motivation helped me crawl a few more meters. My hand touched the cold wooden step. I used all my remaining strength to bang hard on the door. Once, twice. I heard footsteps inside. The door opened. The warm, yellow light spilled out, enveloping my freezing body. My wife stood there, the smile vanishing from her face when she saw my pathetic condition. Her piercing scream was the last sound I heard before darkness swallowed my mind. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. IV tubes were tangled all over me. The doctor said I was lucky. The bullet in my shoulder had missed my heart by just millimeters. The cold from the snow had helped slow the bleeding, but it had also caused severe hypothermia. The police came to take my statement before I could even sit up. They showed me mugshots, young faces, cold and defiant. I recognized the leader immediately, Marvelous Keen, and his crew. They were known as the Downtown Posse. The police officer with the haggard face told me what had happened during the 3 days I was unconscious. A spree of senseless murders. They hadn't just attacked me. They had shot and killed a girl making a call at a public phone just to steal her sneakers. They shot and killed a man right inside his home. They shot and killed a woman at a convenience store. 6 people dead, countless injured. All took place in just 3 short days over the Christmas holiday. They killed not out of vengeance, not for great sums of money. They killed because they felt like it, to assert their status in their small, twisted gang. I lay there staring at the white hospital ceiling, feeling a profound terror seep into my soul. I had faced pure evil, not the evil of professional criminals with motives, but the evil of apathy, of the emptiness in the souls of a lost generation. The wounds on my body slowly healed, leaving ugly, raised scars, but the scar in my mind never closed. Every time Christmas returns, when the snow begins to fall and carols ring out, I cannot stop myself from looking out the window, looking into the darkness of the road outside my house. I see the car with its lights off silently approaching. I see the soulless eyes of Marvelous Keen. I feel the bone-chilling cold of the snow seeping into my skin and the metallic tang of my own blood. I am a survivor. People call me a lucky witness, but they don't understand that a part of me died on that Christmas Eve in 1992. The belief in safety, in human compassion, was shattered by the bullets of those kids. I still keep the snow shovel from that year in the garage, but I never use it at night anymore. And every time I drive home, I always check the rearview mirror, fearing that a car with its lights off is silently following, carrying death wrapped in the guise of young people. Christmas is no longer a day of peace for me. It is a reminder of how fragile the line between life and death is, and how evil can knock on your door at any time, with a faint smile and a gun in hand. The red dirt road leading up to Mockingbird Hill had never felt so long and gloomy. The bare branches of the oak trees reached their skinny arms toward the gray Arkansas sky, like dry skeletons grasping for the last bit of light of the fading day. I gripped the steering wheel of my old Ford, trying to keep the tires from slipping on the muddy slush left by the overnight snow and rain. Today was gift-giving day, December 26th. Following an invitation from Mr. Ronald Gene Simmons, my future father-in-law, the entire extended family was supposed to gather here for a belated Christmas celebration. I was Rebecca's boyfriend, his granddaughter. She had arrived early this morning with her parents to help with preparations. I was coming later because of my shift at the gas station. A strange, uneasy feeling stirred within me. Gene was not an amiable man. He was a former serviceman, authoritarian, controlling, and always exuded a menacing presence that made others wary. He had built his house on this hill like a fortress, isolated from the outside world. No phone, no running water, surrounded by barbed wire fences and no trespassing signs. A private kingdom where Gene was king, and every family member was a subject who had to obey absolutely. I parked the car at the bottom of the slope because the road ahead was too muddy. Silence enveloped the hill. There was no Christmas music, no sound of children playing. By now, with the large number of Simmons' children and grandchildren, the house should have been noisy like a bustling market. But all I heard was the wind whistling through the wooden planks and the mournful caw of a crow from the pine forest. I walked up the slope, the cold air seeping through my coat. The closer I got to the patched-up mobile home addition, the greater my apprehension grew. The windows were dark, like soulless eye sockets staring at me. The gate was slightly ajar. I stepped into the yard. Mr. Gene's truck was parked there, along with Rebecca's parents' car, so everyone was here, but where were they? I knocked on the door. 3 dry, sharp knocks rang out, swallowed by the profound silence. No one answered. I tried turning the doorknob. The door was unlocked. A frigid gust of air blew out from inside, colder than the outside air. The musty smell typical of the house mixed with something else, something strange, a metallic, rusty smell, and the smell of freshly dug earth. I stepped into the living room. The dim light from the dusty window panes illuminated the interior. The room was messy but deserted. On the dining table, plates still held cold, half-eaten food, a half-drunk glass of beer. The television was on but muted, its eerie blue light flickering onto the rough wooden walls. "Hello, is anyone home?" I called out, my voice trembling and echoing in the empty house. Still no answer. I walked further down the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The floor was sticky under my shoes. I bent down to look. In the dim light, I saw dark, splotchy stains on the wooden floor, stretching from the living room toward the bathroom. My heart began to pound erratically. My rational mind told me to turn and run immediately, but my worry for Rebecca held me back. I tiptoed forward, my hand touching the small handgun holster I always carried for protection during my night shifts. I reached the door of the large dining room, which was used as the family meeting area. The door was ajar. I pushed it gently. The scene before me made the blood in my veins turn to ice. They were there, all of them. But they were not sitting around the table, laughing. They were sprawled on the floor, lined up in a chillingly neat row. Rebecca's parents, her aunts and uncles, and Rebecca herself. The bodies were cold, rigid. Some were covered by tablecloths or jackets, revealing only purple-tinged feet. Others lay exposed with bullet wounds in their chests and heads. The blood had dried into dark, black patches on the floor. I stumbled back, my mouth wide open but unable to utter a sound. My throat felt constricted. This was not the scene of an ordinary murder. This was a slaughterhouse, a ritualistic execution. Suddenly, the wooden floor creaked behind me. I spun around. Ronald Gene Simmons was sitting in an old armchair in a dark corner of the hallway, a spot I had just walked past without noticing. He sat there, still as a stone statue, his cold eyes looking at me over his reading glasses pushed down on his nose. In his hands was a small caliber .22 handgun. Next to the chair, 2 other rifles were propped up. He didn't seem surprised to see me. Perhaps he had been waiting for me, or waiting for anyone unfortunate enough to stumble into this hell. "You're late," he said. His voice was deep and calm, terrifyingly so, as if he were scolding me for being late for dinner, not for having just massacred his entire family. I looked at the gun in his hand, then into the eyes of that monster. There was no madness, no rage, only absolute control. He had killed them one by one, systematically, according to a plan. He was the most patient predator I had ever seen. "Run!" My survival instinct screamed in my head. I was not an action movie hero. I was just a young man facing the devil. Without a word, I turned and sprinted toward the back door. A small, sharp crack echoed. The bullet slammed into the wooden door frame right next to my ear, spraying sharp splinters. I burst through the door and ran out into the backyard. Dusk was settling. Snow mixed with rain began to fall again. I slipped on the muddy ground, falling headlong into a freshly dug pit. A foul stench rushed into my nostrils. In that shallow hole, under a sparse layer of earth, I saw a tiny hand sticking out. It was a child's hand. My stomach churned on the verge of vomiting. He hadn't just killed the adults. He had killed the children too, his grandchildren whom he still forced to call him sir. He buried them here, right behind the house, like burying sick animals. I scrambled back up, mud and tears mixing on my face. I heard the heavy footsteps of Gene approaching the back door. He was not rushing. He knew I couldn't run fast on this terrain. He was enjoying the final hunt. I plunged into the dense woods surrounding the hill. Branches whipped across my face and body painfully. I didn't dare run along the main path because I knew he had rifles. In the open ground, I would be a moving target. I ran for my life in the darkness, stumbling constantly. The sound of gunfire echoed a few more times behind me, but they were growing fainter. Perhaps he didn't pursue me deep into the woods. He was the ruler of his kingdom. He didn't like leaving his territory. I ran until my lungs burned like fire and my limbs were exhausted. I reached the main road where car lights were passing. I waved down a logging truck that was driving by. The driver looked at my mud-covered, panicked state with suspicion, but he stopped. "Please call the police," I gasped, collapsing into the passenger seat. He killed them all. He killed the whole family. Pope County Police cordoned off Mockingbird Hill that night, but Gene was not there. He had driven away the next morning, continuing his rampage in Russellville, where he opened fire in a lawyer's office and a convenience store, killing 2 more people before being captured. When police excavated the grounds around the house and checked inside, the number of victims sent shivers down the spine of the entire nation, 16 people. His wife, son, daughter, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, and grandchildren. 14 bodies were found at the house on the hill. All were his blood relatives. I was the only person who walked into that house that day and walked out with my life intact. Later during the trials, I sat in the witness stand, looking at the back of Gene Simmons' head. He sat there, still with that calm, ruthlessly cold demeanor. He showed no remorse. He refused legal counsel, refused to appeal. He wanted to die. People said he did it for control. When his wife threatened divorce and to take the children away, he decided that if he couldn't have them, no one could. He wiped out his lineage in one of the bloodiest Christmases in Arkansas history. I still have nightmares about that afternoon. I see Rebecca's eyes among the still bodies. I see the tiny hand sticking out of the hole behind the house. And most terrifyingly, I see the image of Gene Simmons sitting in the darkness, gun in hand, waiting for the next prey to step into his trap. Christmas for everyone else is a time for reunion, joy, and laughter. But for me, Christmas is forever the smell of damp earth, the smell of blood, and the bone-chilling cold on Mockingbird Hill. That was the day I realized that the most terrifying devil doesn't come from hell, but can be the respected father or grandfather sitting at the head of the table at a family feast. The morning sun on December 24th poured a pale, weak yellow light onto Covina Street in Modesto, California, not quite enough to dispel the damp chill of winter. I stood by the kitchen window, holding a hot cup of coffee, looking across at 523, the home of Scott and Lassie. They were the perfect couple in the eyes of the entire neighborhood. The handsome, successful husband, the beautiful, radiant wife expecting their first child. They were the epitome of the American dream everyone aspired to. But something was strange this morning. Around 10 o'clock, I saw their golden retriever, Mackenzie, wandering in the street. This was unusual. Lassie loved that dog like a child, and with her 8-month pregnant belly, she would never let it run loose without a leash, especially since the leash was still attached to its collar, dragging sluggishly on the dirty road. I put down my coffee cup, quickly grabbed a sweater, and stepped outside. The frigid air slapped my face. I called the dog over. It wagged its tail, but its brown eyes looked bewildered, restless. The leash was covered in mud and dead leaves. I led Mackenzie toward the Peterson house. The front gate was wide open. Lassie's Land Rover was still parked in the driveway, but Scott's Ford pickup was gone. The house door was closed. The curtains were drawn tight. A heavy silence enveloped the charming single-story wooden house, a stark contrast to Lassie's usual cheerful bustle. I put the dog in the backyard and closed the gate. I knocked on the front door, but no one answered. Perhaps Lassie was asleep, or she had walked over to her mother's house nearby. I reassured myself, but a sense of unease rippled through me like a bitter sediment. Late that afternoon, as darkness began to swallow the street, Scott returned. I saw him step out of the pickup truck, his demeanor relaxed but with an underlying hint of haste. He didn't go straight inside but walked around the yard, then he started making a phone call. A moment later, he came over and knocked on my door. His face then I will never forget, an expression of concern that was too perfectly staged. He asked if I had seen Lassie. He said he had just returned from a fishing trip and the house was empty. His wife was missing. Fishing on Christmas Eve, with his wife 8 months pregnant and finding it difficult to move. Would a model husband do that? I, along with him and a few other neighbors, began searching the nearby park area. We called Lassie's name in vain. Scott called too, but his voice lacked the trembling, broken quality of a man about to lose his wife and child. It was monotone, hollow. The police arrived. The house at 523 lit up with searchlights and flashing blue and red lights. I watched from across the street. Scott sat on the doorstep, his head in his hands. From afar, he looked like a distressed husband. But when a police officer approached to question him, I saw him look up. He was strangely calm. He answered every question clearly, without stumbling, without panic. The days that followed were a prolonged nightmare. Modesto was flooded with missing person flyers. Lassie's radiant smile was printed on every utility pole, every store window. The entire country focused on this case. Hundreds of volunteers poured in to search every bush, every blade of grass. I also joined the search. We walked along the riverbanks, wading into the marshlands, but Scott did not. He was busy with phone calls, with avoiding cameras. He said he was too heartbroken to participate in the search. Or perhaps he knew exactly where she was, so there was no need to look. Some nights I looked across at his house. The light was still on. I saw his silhouette moving in the living room. Sometimes I saw him pull the curtain back slightly, staring out at the empty street where police cars were still stationed. His eyes were cold like a reptile's, not the eyes of someone waiting for his wife to return, but the eyes of someone calculating when this trouble would finally end. Gradually, chilling details began to emerge through the whispers of the police and neighbors. Scott said he went fishing in San Francisco Bay, 90 miles from home. He had just bought a small aluminum boat. No one knew about this, not even Lassie. Why would a man secretly buy a boat right before his child was born? And why take it out fishing on a cold Christmas Eve, in such a distant place, leaving his pregnant wife alone at home? And then there was the matter of the bleach smell. A housekeeper said the house reeked of cleaning bleach that day. Scott had scrubbed the house. He did laundry. He cleaned meticulously. A man who was typically lazy about housework suddenly became unusually diligent right after his wife vanished. I started piecing things together. That morning when I saw Mackenzie, the leash was still around its neck. Scott said Lassie took the dog for a walk, but Lassie had stopped walking weeks ago because her doctor advised her to rest. Furthermore, if she was abducted while walking, Why did the dog return home and wander around with the leash still attached? A kidnapper wouldn't release the dog. There was only one truth. Lassie never left the house that morning. She died right inside her cozy home, and the dog was let out to create a false crime scene. January came, bringing another shock: Amber Frey. That woman appeared on television, trembling and brave, publicly revealing her relationship with Scott. He had lied to her that he was single. He had lied that his wife was dead, before Lassie even went missing. I sat in front of the TV, a chill running down my spine. He had planned his wife's death. He had treated Lassie as if she were already dead while she was still alive and smiling, preparing baby clothes for their son. He wanted freedom. He wanted to escape the responsibilities of being a father and husband to pursue a new romantic adventure. Scott became the most hated man in America, yet he maintained that terrifyingly impassive mask. He even sold Lassie's car for a new pickup truck. He turned the unborn baby's room into a storage space. He disposed of his wife's belongings as if to erase all traces of her existence. I watched him drive his new truck home, his face expressionless as he passed the candles and flowers people had placed outside the door in prayer for Lassie. He was a monster in human guise, living right next door to me, greeting me every morning. That thought gave me chronic insomnia. Then the fateful day arrived, April. A severe storm washed 2 bodies ashore in San Francisco Bay, an incomplete female body and a tiny fetus. DNA results confirmed they were Lassie and Connor, the son who never had a chance to cry. They were found exactly where Scott claimed he went fishing. Police arrested Scott at a golf course where he had bleached his hair and was carrying thousands of dollars in cash, a dagger, camping gear, and a map of the Mexican border. He was ready to flee. The trial was long and intense. I followed every day. I heard prosecutors describe how he might have strangled Lassie at home or drowned her, how he wrapped her body in a blue tarp, using makeshift concrete anchors to sink her body to the bottom of the deep, cold bay. I imagined the scene, the small boat bobbing in the vast sea on Christmas Eve, Scott, the man with the charming smile, laboriously pushing his wife and son into the water. He watched the body sink, bubbles rising and then stopping completely. He started the engine and returned, called friends, feigned concern, and began the biggest performance of his life. Scott was sentenced to death. When he heard the verdict, his face remained stony. No tears, no remorse. His eyes were as empty as the day he stood outside my door asking where his wife was. Years have passed. The house at 523 has new owners. New laughter rings out. But every time Christmas arrives, when I see the twinkling string lights and the Christmas trees going up, I can't stop myself from shuddering. I remember Lassie. I remember her radiant smile as she stroked her pregnant belly. And I remember Mackenzie wandering in the street with a muddy leash. The devil does not have horns and fangs. The devil can have the face of a charming young man, a model husband, a friendly neighbor. He can smile at you, talk about the weather, while his mind is calculating how to dispose of your body on a sacred holiday. That Christmas Eve in Modesto had no miracle, only ultimate betrayal and the coldness of a human heart, colder than the waters of San Francisco Bay. I still live here, still look at that house every day, like a night watchman guarding a painful memory that must never be forgotten. The memory of the woman who was erased by the person she loved most, on the day that should have been her happiest. The black and white photograph of the entire Lawson family hanging on my living room wall has faded to a sepia tone over time, but the eyes of the people in it still cut like razors, piercing my mind every time I unintentionally glance at it. It was the last photo. The fateful picture was taken just a few days before Christmas 1929. Charles Lawson stood there, his hand resting on his wife's shoulder, surrounded by his 7 children. They wore brand new, expensive clothes, outfits that a tobacco farmer's family in Germantown, North Carolina, at the time could only dream of. Everyone said Charles was generous. Charles loved his wife and children. Only I, who lived on the adjacent farm and was close friends with his son Arthur, felt a chill run down my spine when I saw the stiff, lifeless look on their faces in that picture. Christmas morning that year was cold and damp. Thick fog enveloped the bare tobacco fields after the harvest, turning the entire countryside into a gloomy, gray painting. I walked quickly on the worn dirt path leading to the Lawson house, carrying a bag of hot roasted chestnuts as a gift. I had planned to go rabbit hunting with Arthur this afternoon in the oak woods behind the hill. The silence was chilling. Normally, at this hour, the voices of the Lawson children would echo everywhere. Little James and Raymond would be running and chasing each other around the hay bales, and Mary Lou would be crying for her mother. but today the farm was shrouded in absolute silence, as if all life had been sucked out. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the rotten wood planks of the tobacco barn was present. I walked past the tobacco barn, which was near the main road. The barn door was wide open. I was about to call out for Arthur when my foot tripped over something soft under the dry leaves. I bent down to look. My heart seemed to stop. It was Arthur. My best friend lay face down on the cold ground, right near the corner of the barn. A dark streak of blood stained the brand new coat his father had bought him last week. His head was misshapen, a brutal blow, and a bullet wound. I recoiled, my stomach churning with nausea. Not far from there, behind the pile of firewood, lay Mabel. The 13-year-old girl was curled up like a discarded doll. Like her brother, Mabel had been beaten and shot. My mind was reeling. What was happening? A robbery? Or had some lunatic escaped from an asylum? I wanted to run, to scream for help, but my feet automatically carried me toward the main house as if compelled by a ghost. I needed to know if the others were safe. Fanny, Marie, and the younger children. I crept closer to the porch. The torn screen door swung in the wind, making a ghostly creaking sound. On the wooden porch floor lay Mrs. Fanny, Charles's wife, the gentle woman who toiled year-round. She was lying on her back, her arms limp at her sides. Blood trickled from her chest down the cracks of the wooden floor, dripping onto the ground below. I held my breath, stepping over Fanny's body to look inside the house. The scene inside the living room was a living hell that, even if I lived to be 100, I would never be able to scrub from my memory. Marie, the 17-year-old eldest daughter, was slumped in front of the fireplace. The raisin pie she was baking was still on the table, not yet put in the oven. The smell of flour, raisins mingled with the metallic stench of blood and gunpowder, creating a thick, suffocating atmosphere. Next to her were James and Raymond, the two little boys. They seemed to have been trying to hide when death arrived. And in the crib, baby Mary Lou, just 4 months old. The baby was not spared either. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, trembling violently. What horrified me the most was not just the deaths, but the way the bodies were arranged. All of them, from Arthur and Mabel outside the tobacco barn, to Fanny and the children inside the house, all were lying in a neat position, their hands folded across their chests, and under each person's head was propped a rock or a pillow. That was not the act of a crazed robber. That was a ritual, a morbid kind of care from a family member. Charles. The name flashed in my mind like lightning. Only Charles would do that. Only he would have the right to arrange his family in such a way. I recalled Charles's eyes in the recent days. He was taciturn, saying little, but he was spending money like water. He took the whole family shopping for fine clothes, took them for a portrait. He was preparing them. He was preparing for his own family's funeral. A sound came from the pine forest behind the house, making me jump, the crackle of a dry branch breaking. He was still here. Panic flared up, burning every nerve. I turned and bolted out of the death-stricken house. I ran frantically across the tobacco field, mud spraying everywhere. I dared not look back, afraid of catching Charles's cold gaze and the black muzzle of a gun pointed at the back of my neck. I ran to my uncle's house half a mile away, panting as I recounted what I had just seen. My uncle, his face drained of color, immediately called the sheriff. That afternoon, the entire town of Germantown was in an uproar. Police, neighbors, and even curious onlookers from nearby areas descended upon the Lawson farm. They found the bodies of 7 people, the wife and 6 children. Only Charles was missing. The men of the area, armed with hunting rifles and tracking dogs, began scouring the woods surrounding the farm. I followed the group, my heart heavy with hatred and fear. Snow began to fall lightly, covering the still wet blood trails with a funereal white. The dogs' barking echoed from the direction of the old oak wood. They had found a trace. We advanced deeper into the forest. The atmosphere was tense, like a string about to snap. Every finger was resting on the trigger. Charles was an excellent shot. He had a 12-gauge shotgun and knew this forest better than anyone. Suddenly, a shot rang out. It wasn't a shot from the search party. The sound was muffled, echoing from the base of a large oak tree. Everyone froze, then cautiously approached the spot. Beneath the oak tree lay Charles Lawson. He had been walking back and forth around the tree all afternoon, his footprints forming a circle in the soft ground. He had watched the house, watched the police take away the bodies of his wife and children, and when he knew there was no escape, or perhaps when he had completed the tragic performance of his life, he took his own life. The muzzle was pointed at his chest. His face still held the same cold, enigmatic expression. In his coat pocket, they found letters addressed to his parents, but none that explained this heinous act. Why? That question has hung in the gray sky of Germantown for nearly a century. There were many rumors. Some said Charles went insane after a head injury a few months prior. Some said he was too worried about his finances. But the most terrifying rumor, the one I believed to be true, involved Marie. The most beautiful 17-year-old daughter in the area. People said Marie was pregnant, and the child was her own father's, Charles's. Before she died, Marie had confided in a friend that she carried a terrible secret, a secret she would take to the grave. And Charles, wanting to bury the incest and the shame, decided to wipe out the entire family on the day Christ was born. After the massacre, the Lawson house became a gruesome tourist attraction. Charles's younger brother even opened the doors for visitors, charging 25 cents per entry. People crowded in to see the dried bloodstains on the floor, to look at the moldy raisin pie on the table. The morbid curiosity of people disgusted me. I never set foot in that house again, but every Christmas Eve, when I sit by my warm fireplace, I feel a chill down my spine. I remember Arthur lying dead by the tobacco barn. I remember the rocks propped under the children's heads. Charles Lawson didn't just kill his family. He killed the very soul of this land. He turned the holiday of love and goodwill into a holiday of blood and tears. The Lawson family photograph is still there, reproduced in criminology books. People look at it and see a historical tragedy. As for me, I look at it and see Charles's eyes, the eyes of a devil disguised as a father, meticulously plotting every step to lead his entire family to death just as they were wearing their finest clothes. That was Charles Lawson's Christmas gift, an eternal silence and cold graves on the high hill where the wind never stops blowing. I am the neighbor who saw hell, and that hell was named family. The town of Cisco stood isolated in the sun-drenched, dusty plains of Texas, where the smell of crude oil mingled with the scent of cow manure, creating the characteristic atmosphere of the shifting Wild West. It was the 23rd of December, 1927. The Christmas spirit had seeped into every corner of this small town, but it lacked the lavish splendor of New York or Chicago. Here, Christmas meant clumsily strung colored lights on rotting wooden telephone poles and hastily cut Christmas trees from the forest, their branches drooping from lack of water. I stood behind the teller cage of the First National Bank, flipping through stacks of old, frayed paper bills that smelled of the sweat of cowboys and oil workers. I was a teller, a job considered one of the most secure and respectable in this backwater place. Customers streamed in and out. Everyone wanted to withdraw some cash to buy gifts for their wives and children or prepare for tomorrow night's party. The loud chatter, the sound of boots stomping on the wooden floor, and the clatter of the counting machine created a familiar backdrop. Around noon, everyone's attention was drawn to the large window overlooking the main street. A brilliant red figure was walking along the sidewalk. Santa Claus. The man wore a cheap red velvet suit, a stark white fake beard covering half his face, and a red conical hat that bobbed with every step. The town's children cheered, swarming around him like bees from a broken hive. Adults smiled and waved, a rare warm sight amidst the dry Texas winter sun. The man stopped in front of the bank door, waved to the children, and pushed the door open to step inside. The entire lobby seemed to brighten. Everyone stopped what they were doing, turning to look at the special guest. I smiled too, intending to joke with him a little to see which of the town's usual drunks was trying to earn a few tips. But my smile vanished as he approached the teller cage. Under the brim of the red hat, the man's eyes held no warmth. They were cold, sharp, and malicious. And instead of pulling out a handful of candy or a gift from the red sack on his back, he pulled out a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. "Hands up," he said. His voice was low and gravelly, not a resonant shout but a dry command, enough to make those standing close by hear and feel a chill. The change happened so quickly that my brain couldn't process it. Santa Claus was pointing a gun at me. Was this a joke, some bizarre Christmas skit? But then 3 other men stormed through the door. They weren't wearing Santa costumes. They wore faded work overalls, their caps pulled low to hide their faces, and they brandished rifles and pistols. This was a robbery. The air in the bank froze. The laughter died instantly. The children surrounding Santa Claus looked bewildered, not understanding what was happening until the man pointed his gun at the ceiling. A sharp shot rang out, sending plaster fragments showering down onto the floor. "Everyone down," the man roared. Customers screamed, pushing each other to lie flat on the dirty floor. I and the other employees quickly put our hands up, backing away until our backs hit the bars of the vault. The man in the Santa suit, the leader, jumped over the teller counter with astonishing agility for the bulky costume. He pressed the gun to my temple. His breath, smelling of cheap liquor, wafted into my face. He ordered me to open the safe. I trembled as I complied. My fingers were slick with cold sweat, taking forever to dial the correct combination. The heavy steel door swung open. He shoved me aside, grabbing stacks of cash and stuffing them into the red sack on his shoulder. The sack that should have held gifts for children now held greed and crime. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had chosen the wrong town to rob. Cisco was not a place where gentle people just bowed their heads. Here, firearms were as essential as a wallet or a set of keys. In the chaos, a woman managed to sneak out the back door and screamed a warning. Her cry spread like wildfire. Bank robbery. Santa Claus is robbing the bank. Within minutes, Sheriff Bedford and the deputy were on the scene, but they were not alone. Dozens of townsfolk, from the grocer, the mechanic, to the cowboys drinking at the bar across the street, all grabbed their guns and ran into the street. Rifles, shotguns, pistols. The whole town surrounded the bank. Inside, the accomplice guarding the door screamed the alert. The police are here. Immediately, a hail of bullets poured into the bank. I have never been to war, but I believe this must be what a living hell is like. The window glass shattered, thousands of shards flying like sharp hail. Bullets slammed into the walls, the wooden counter tearing up the floor. Deafening explosions rang out relentlessly, creating a jarring wall of sound. The robbers fired back wildly. Gun smoke billowed, filling the lobby. The acrid smell of gunpowder assaulted my nostrils, making me choke and cough. I lay flat on the floor, covering my head with my hands, praying for a miracle. Bullets whizzed past just above my head, embedding themselves in the file cabinets behind me. "We're surrounded," the accomplice named Louis screamed, his voice hoarse with panic. He had just been hit in the stomach. Blood stained his blue shirt dark red. The boss, Marshal Ratliff, the crazed Santa Claus, didn't flinch. He reloaded his gun, his bloodshot eyes sweeping over the hostages huddled on the floor. "Grab them, human shields," he commanded. He grabbed my collar and yanked me up. I staggered to my feet, my limbs shaking uncontrollably. He pushed me toward the front door. At the same time, his accomplices grabbed two little girls who were screaming in terror. "Move it," he jammed the gun into my back. "If you stop, I'll blow your head off." We were shoved out of the bank door, stepping into the war zone. The scene outside was horrifying. The whole street was filled with smoke and dust. Hundreds of citizens were hiding behind cars, telephone poles, pointing their guns at us. When they saw us emerge, the firing paused for a moment, but the tension remained. "Don't shoot, there are hostages," someone yelled. But in the bloodlust and confusion, not everyone heard. A few shots still rang out. A bullet grazed my shoulder, a searing pain like a red-hot knife cutting into me. I clenched my jaw to keep from collapsing. The robbers hid behind us, using our bodies to shield them as they moved toward the blue Nash car parked on the curb. I could feel the insane pounding of Santa Claus's heart through his thick suit. He was shaking, not with fear, but with morbid excitement. They shoved us into the car. The car was packed. The injured man groaned in the back seat, his blood soaking the upholstery. The two little girls were squeezed in the middle, crying silently. I was thrown into the front seat, next to the driver. The boss sat in the back, the gun still aimed directly at the back of my neck. "Drive," he yelled. The car roared and sped away, but immediately, a volley of shots from the citizens punctured the rear tires. The car swerved violently, but managed to limp on its steel rims, sparking against the road. We escaped the town, leaving the sirens and the fading sound of gunfire behind, but the trouble had just begun. The car was riddled with bullet holes, the glass shattered, the tires flat, and more importantly, the gas tank was leaking. The strong smell of raw gasoline filled the car, signaling a fiery death if any spark ignited it. "We need to switch cars," the driver said, his voice strained to the breaking point. They flagged down an oncoming Oldsmobile. It was a family on their way home for the holiday. The robbers jumped out, guns in hand, and dragged the driver and his family out. In the chaos of switching cars, I realized this was my only chance. The boss was busy helping the wounded man into the new car. The driver was fumbling to start the stolen car. No one was paying attention to me for a few brief seconds. I glanced toward the deep ditch on the roadside, where weeds grew taller than a man. I didn't think twice. I launched myself into the ditch, rolling through thorns and gravel. "Stop!" a shout rang out, followed by a gunshot. The bullet slammed into the ground right next to my feet, spraying mud onto my face. I didn't stop. I crawled quickly, hiding deep in the dry storm drain, my heart pounding as if it would burst from my chest. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of pursuing footsteps, waiting for a bullet to end my life. But no one followed. They didn't have time. The sound of police sirens was echoing in the distance. They quickly shoved the two little girls into the new car and sped away, abandoning the seriously wounded accomplice Louis and the wrecked old car by the roadside. They also abandoned me, a hostage who was no longer of value and too much trouble to pursue. I lay still in the storm drain, covered in mud and dry grass, listening to the engine fade into the distance. Silence gradually returned to the lonely road, broken only by the wind whistling through the bare cotton fields. I survived. I slowly crawled out, my whole body aching. The wound on my shoulder was bleeding, soaking my white shirt. I looked back at the abandoned Nash car. Louis lay motionless in the back seat, his breathing shallow. His blood stained the money scattered on the car floor, the money that the citizens of Cisco had painstakingly saved all year. The police and citizens caught up a few minutes later. They found me sitting by the roadside, dazed and trembling. The pursuit continued for days after, becoming the largest manhunt in Texas history. Ratliff and his accomplices were cornered, wounded by gunfire, and eventually captured. The two little girls were safely released, but the price paid was heavy. Several police officers were killed. I returned home that night, but the Christmas spirit had permanently vanished from me. My wife hugged me, sobbing, but I stood stiffly like a block of wood. All I could see in my mind was the color red. The red of the Santa suit, the red of the blood on the bank floor, the red of the eyes filled with greed and malice. Marshal Ratliff, the Santa Claus of the robbery, was later dragged from jail and lynched by an angry mob. Texas justice was served. But for me, the image of him entering the bank, waving to the children with a gun hidden behind his back, would forever be a nightmare that haunted me. From then on, whenever December came, and I saw Santa Clauses ringing bells on street corners or in shopping centers, I would feel a cold dread run down my spine. I didn't see kindness or magic. I only saw deception. I saw a devil hiding beneath the most sacred mask, ready to draw a gun and turn the holiday of love into a day of blood and tears. That was the Christmas gift I received in 1927, the permanent loss of faith in superficial goodness. I continued to work at the bank, but I never smiled when a stranger walked in again. My hand was always near the alarm button, and my eyes were always searching for what was hidden behind those smiles or bright costumes, because I knew the devil could come from anywhere, and sometimes he comes in the guise of a gift bearer. The characteristic humid heat of the Florida swamp seemed relentless, even in the final days of December. The morning mist drifted lazily over the fields of head-high grass in Osprey, covering the isolated Walker family farm with an eerie, desolate look. I parked my old pickup truck next to the wooden fence and turned off the engine. The silence was unnerving. Normally, by this time, Cliff would have been up for hours tending to the cattle. The sound of the milking machine, the cattle lowing, or at least the cheerful sounds of the two children, Jimmy and Debbie, playing should have been ringing out. Cliff and Christine were the most hardworking couple I knew. They never overslept, especially with Christmas fast approaching and the farm work piling up. I stepped out of the truck, my boot soles crunching on the gravel. I was a friend and also helped Cliff with the farm work. We had planned to check the damaged northern fence today. "Cliff," I called out, my voice hoarse from the morning mist. There was no reply. I walked up onto the porch. The screen door was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the breeze. The main door inside was also unlocked. This wasn't uncommon in this rural area, where people trusted each other implicitly, but a feeling of unease crept into my gut, like walking into the woods and sensing the eyes of a predator watching from behind. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. A foul stench hit my nostrils immediately. It wasn't the smell of decomposing bodies, as it had only been one night, but the smell of fresh blood, gunpowder, and the lingering scent of fear suspended in the air. The living room was strangely messy. The Christmas presents that Christine had excitedly shown me yesterday, bought in Sarasota, were strewn across the floor. Wrapping paper was torn, or perhaps hadn't even been fully wrapped yet. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, its glittering ornaments reflecting a horrific sight. Cliff lay there, right in the middle of the living room. The strong, robust man I used to share a beer with after work was now lying face down on the floor, motionless. Blood spread from a bullet wound in his head, soaking the handmade rug that Christine cherished. I knelt beside him, my hand trembling as I touched his shoulder, ice cold. Panic began to rise, tightening my chest. I wanted to scream, but my throat was constricted. Where was Christine? Where were the children? I scanned the room, and I saw her. Christine lay in a more hidden corner, her clothes disheveled and torn. There had clearly been a fierce struggle. She had fought. I knew Christine's nature. She would fight to her last breath to protect her family. But the killer had not given her a chance. A cruel bullet had taken the life of the young mother. But the most horrible sight still awaited me. The wind whistling through the window crack sounded like a mournful cry. I dragged my heavy feet toward the children's bedroom, silently praying for a miracle. Maybe the children were hiding under the bed. Maybe the killer had spared those innocent souls. But there was no miracle in Osprey today. Jimmy, the cheerful 3-year-old, lay slumped on the floor, and baby Debbie, not yet 2, lay in her crib. They had been shot too. I fell back onto the wooden floor, tears streaming uncontrollably. Who could do this? Who could hold a gun and pull the trigger on such innocent children? This was no ordinary robbery murder. This was the work of pure evil. The person who did this had lost all trace of humanity. I looked around the room. Everything was still there. Money, valuables didn't seem to have been largely taken. Cliff's new Chevrolet truck was still parked outside. What was the motive for this crime? Personal revenge, or just the random madness of drifters? I staggered to my feet, my head swimming. I needed to call the police. I needed to get out of this house of death. As I turned back into the living room, my gaze caught a detail I had missed in my initial panic. On the floor, mixed with the pool of blood, was a shoe print, a large, heavy military boot print, and a strange cigarette butt, not the brand Cliff usually smoked. There were 2 people or more. They had been here, rummaged through things, tortured, and killed an entire happy family in a matter of moments. I ran to my truck, my hands shaking as I put the key in the ignition. I started the engine and sped toward town, leaving behind the pretty white house that had become a mass grave. The sheriff arrived with the investigation team. The entire town of Osprey was shaken. The simple farmers, the gentle homemakers gathered, whispering to each other in deep fear. No one dared to leave their doors unlocked anymore. No one dared to let their children play alone in the yard. The investigation was extensive. Hundreds of clues were gathered. People spoke of a strange car lurking around the area the previous afternoon. People spoke of strange men with rough appearances. I was questioned by the police multiple times. As the first person to discover the scene, I became a key link, sometimes even a suspect. But I didn't care. I just wanted them to catch the killer. I wanted to see them pay for their crime. Time passed and names began to appear in the news. Perry Smith and Dick Hickok, 2 cold-blooded murderers who committed the Clutter family massacre in Kansas, famously documented in the book In Cold Blood. They were in Florida at the time. They were driving a stolen car. They had purchased items similar to those found at the Walker crime scene. I remember that fateful day. I remember the cold feeling when I walked into the house. What if I had arrived a little earlier? Or what if I had casually dropped by the night before to drop off Christmas gifts as planned? Perhaps I would have been lying there too, next to Cliff, with a bullet in my head. Or maybe I had encountered them on the road. The strange car I briefly saw at the intersection that afternoon. 2 men sitting inside, staring at me through the dusty window. I didn't pay attention then. Thinking back now, a chill runs down my spine. Perhaps I had looked into the eyes of death without knowing it. The Walker family case gradually stalled. Although all suspicion pointed toward Smith and Hickok, there was never enough evidence to indict them. They were hanged for the Kansas murders, taking the secret of the bloody night in Florida to their graves. Decades have passed. The old house is gone, but the land still carries an indescribable gloom. Every time I drive past the old road in the final days of the year, when the mist hangs low on the old oak trees, I hear the laughter of little Jimmy echoing from the past. Christmas for others is joy, reunion. But for me, Christmas 1959 was the end of peace. It is a cruel reminder that this world harbors devils in human form, wandering nomads carrying death in their luggage, ready to sow tragedy upon any home, no matter how sacred the holiday. I still live, still work on the sunny fields of Florida, but a part of my soul died with the Walker family on that misty morning. I am the witness to an unsolved crime, the keeper of the memory of a family portrait torn apart by the hand of an unknown evil. The fog on Whidbey Island in December is unlike anywhere else. It is dense, wet, and carries the salty tang of the Pacific Ocean, seeping through layers of clothing and chilling to the bone. I drove my old sedan through the opaque curtain of mist to the officers' club. The faint yellow streetlights were blurred, like the drowsy eyes of a deep-sea monster. Tonight was an early Christmas party, combined with a hail and farewell ceremony for departing and incoming squadron officers. In this closed-off, disciplined military world, the officers' club was a sanctuary. It was the only place we could shed our rigid facade, have a few beers, and laugh about training flights. I stepped into the lobby, where warmth and noise immediately hit me. The smell of beer, cigarettes, cheap cologne, and floor wax mingled to create a distinctive aroma of security. A large Christmas tree stood in the corner, its blinking red and green lights reflecting off the gold braiding and shiny brass of the officers' uniforms. I chose a seat at the corner of the bar where I could observe the entire room. Kenneth Rushing was standing near the jukebox, glass in hand, laughing loudly with a group of younger pilots. Captain John Jays was engaged in a serious conversation at a round table near the window. They were exemplary soldiers, family men. The festive atmosphere was infectious. Everyone was thinking about their upcoming leave, gifts for their wives and children, and cozy dinners by the fireplace. We were on a military base. We were surrounded by guards, barbed wire fences, and the strictest security procedures. No one thought that death could walk through that door. But he came. The double doors of the club burst open. The cold wind rushed in, making a few people shiver and turn around. A figure stepped inside. He wore a uniform, a Marine. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Soldiers coming and going at the club was normal, but there was something about his posture that sent a chill down my neck. He didn't walk with the proud gait of a serviceman. He shuffled, his eyes darting back and forth, and his hands hung unnaturally low. His name was Darren Hutchinson. I only learned his name later, but at the time, he was just a strange face, an intruder bringing death. He pulled out a handgun. There were no warning shouts. The brains of trained soldiers were conditioned to react to the enemy on the battlefield, not to a comrade in the middle of a party. Everyone froze, wine glasses still in hand, smiles still lingering on their lips. Everyone thought this was some kind of bizarre joke, a skit for the farewell ceremony, perhaps. Darren raised the gun. A dry crack echoed, sounding like a ruler slamming hard onto a wooden desk. Unlike in the movies, the gunshot in the enclosed space wasn't booming but sharp and concise. Kenneth Rushing fell. The glass in his hand flew out, shattering on the floor. Blood began to spread on his immaculate uniform. Silence reigned for a split second, then chaos erupted. Screaming, chairs overturning, glasses breaking. The men who were brave in the sky were now frantically searching for cover under tables, behind the bar. Survival instinct took over, wiping away all ranks and hierarchy. I slid off the bar stool, squeezing into the narrow space between the refrigerator and the beer kegs. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to burst. I peeked through the gap in the bar. Darren was still standing there. He showed no sign of hurry. He moved the gun muzzle mechanically. Captain Jays tried to do something. Perhaps he intended to rush him or shield someone, but Darren turned the gun toward him. 2 more shots. Jays fell. The man who had just been discussing his retirement plans, his little daughter, now lay motionless on the floor covered in beer and liquor. I bit my lip to stifle a gasp. The smell of gunpowder began to spread, acrid and pungent, overpowering the scent of Christmas pine. He was walking through the room. The sound of his military boots hitting the wooden floor was like a hammer driving nails into a coffin. What did he want? Money, car keys, or simply to kill? He screamed for everyone to lie down, demanding car keys. His voice was strained, mixed with madness and fear. He was afraid too. He knew he had crossed the point of no return. I saw him grab a man by the collar, pressing the gun to his head. He dragged the hostage toward the front doors. He needed an exit. He needed a car to get off this island. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. If he came back, or if he decided to empty his magazine into the people hiding under the tables, I would die. I looked toward the back door, the one leading to the kitchen. It was about 5 meters away, 5 meters between life and death. Taking advantage of the moment he was fumbling with the hostage at the main door, I lunged toward the kitchen door with all my might. I crawled on the slippery floor, my belly pressed against the cold ground, ignoring the glass shards cutting into my elbows and knees. Another shot rang out behind me. The bullet slammed into the liquor cabinet, causing bottles to shatter, wine pouring down like a waterfall. I didn't dare look back. I pushed hard on the spring-loaded door, rolling into the kitchen. The kitchen air was thick with the smell of grease and leftover food. The service staff were huddled in the corner, their faces ashen. I signaled for silence, then pointed toward the escape door that led to the back parking lot. We ran outside. The cold wind and fog hit us, but this time they tasted sweet with freedom. The base alarm began to blare, tearing the quiet night apart. Headlights swept frantically through the fog. Military police were coming. I hid behind a large dumpster, catching my breath. My hands and legs were shaking uncontrollably. I looked back toward the club's main entrance. Darren Hutchinson rushed out, jumped into a car he had just stolen. He sped away, leaving behind desperate cries. The pursuit began immediately. He was captured not long after trying to escape the island, but it was too late. I stood up, walking aimlessly in the fog. My coat was torn, stained with someone else's blood and wine. I looked into the club window. Inside, the Christmas lights were still blinking. The song Silent Night was still playing on the jukebox, distorted and eerie. Kenneth Rushing and John Jays were dead. Many others were injured. The surviving soldiers were hugging each other, crying, or sitting dazed like statues. Darren Hutchinson was a soldier. He had sworn to defend his country, to protect his comrades, but he pointed a gun at his own brothers over greed, over some petty grievance. He turned the safest place into the most dangerous one. That night, I didn't go straight home. I drove to the shore, sitting in my car and looking out at the black ocean. The waves crashing against the rocks sounded like an echo from hell. I had survived many dangerous flying missions. I was mentally prepared to die on the battlefield, but I was never prepared to watch my comrades be executed at a Christmas party. Betrayal, that haunted me more than death itself. The uniform I was once so proud to wear suddenly felt heavy. The enemy is not always on the other side of the battle line. Sometimes he stands right next to you, raising a toast, singing a carol, and waiting for the moment to pull the trigger. The memory of Christmas 1987 at Whidbey Island changed me forever. I became wary, suspicious, and distant. The first thing I do when I enter a crowded room is locate the exits. When I see a soldier carrying a gun, I no longer feel the absolute sense of security I once did. The Whidbey Island fog may lift when the sun rises, but the fog in my mind about that night will never dissipate. It is a cold scar, reminding me that peace is a fragile illusion, and the devil can wear anyone's face at any time.